Should financial literacy be part of the mandatory curriculum in public schools? That's what we're discussing today on the Opinion Talk Show, the talk show where your opinions matter. We are your hosts, Mirna Santiago, Adeline Ortiz, and Marco Caviglia. So Adeline, let's start with you.
Absolutely, unequivocally, yes. Without question, we are long past the time that financial literacy should have been part of the school curriculum. I think that it's really never too early to start, that we should even be starting it at the elementary and middle school levels, where we're teaching at least very basic personal financing things. I teach college level business courses, and I can tell you that many of my students have absolutely no idea about financial literacy, personal finances. Some of them don't even know really how to complete a check or balance a checkbook, or what's a 401k, what's an annuity. They have absolutely no idea, and I think that it's a shame that even at a college level that there are so many students who really just have absolutely no clue. It's never too early to start, and we should be starting. I mean, think about it, folks. I mean, what is financial literacy? It's basically understanding how your money works in the world, and this is something that we all need to know.
Marco.
Well, for years I've been an advocate of having this kind of education in high schools, and not only that, but including insurance, everyday law, and similar things such as investing. And I think that that has immediately beneficial purposes as well as lifelong lessons. And that's certainly better, I think, in my opinion, to teaching that than electives such as psychology and making movies.
Okay. But that's on the high school level. We're talking mandatory on every level. So starting from elementary school,
Absolutely.
So you're talking about first graders and second graders who would be having to take these financial literacy courses. I disagree with you. I think that we already have a full curriculum as it is, especially at the elementary school level. We have kids who are graduating from high school now who cannot read or write. There was just this huge scandal about teachers who were passing kids along who were not leaving them back, and they can't read, they can't write. And now you're going to tell them, now you also have to take this economics course, basically. You're going to have to learn about how money works and where it comes from and what backs the dollar. The kids are already overwhelmed as it is. So I really don't think that you can squeeze one more thing into the curriculum, at least not at the elementary school level. I think maybe if it's available as an elective on the high school level, I might be a little bit more willing to see it as a mandatory on that level.
No, these are basic everyday skills that everyone should have, and it should absolutely start at the earliest levels.
So, but what are you advocating though? Like what would be included in this course for my little 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old?
Well, basically how money is earned. Okay, well, first of all, how do you earn money? What is taxation? How is it taxed? How do you start to save? Doing things like considering long-term planning, setting aside a percentage of all of your income for future needs, planning for retirement. These are all things that you can teach a 6 and 7-year-old at the most basic levels. Is what is an interest rate? What is compound interest? Certainly by high school and college, these are things that students should know. What are interest rates? What is compound interest? How does inflation affect your savings accounts? Things like that. This is exactly what they should understand. Banking, just banking, how to complete a check.
And just to be clear, we're advocating, at least you guys are advocating, a full course. So, my kid would go to English and math and then squeeze in a financial course and then in social studies and science. So a full course, not just something that's going to be mixed into like social studies or world science or whatever it is.
I think it should be integrated into everything they study. I don't see why we couldn't do it that way too.
Well, there's a couple of approaches. I mean, first of all, I don't agree with your squeezed-in term. Okay? I think students have plenty of time to learn what they're supposed to learn. I mean, how many courses in math do they take per day? How many courses in English? Take one, all right, best, and usually it's 3 times a week. So there's plenty of room for that. I'm not crazy about the idea of having them learn this in grade school. Because that's where they have a lot of other issues going on, everything from personality development and getting along with peers and so forth. So there's a lot going on there. But by the time you're in high school, you're really in absorption mode about what do I need to be independent?
Yes.
What do I do to make money? If you talk to young people in high school, seems to gravitate that and other things that they don't talk to us about. So I think in a high school, it should be mandatory. It should be a course, kind of rotating topics within the course. If you can relate it to the other courses, such as mathematics, calculus is a good one, because everything, understanding derivatives and so forth, if you get that sophisticated, it's all about math.
Well, I'm going to double down on my squeezed in, because I actually have an 11-year-old right now who has lunch at 10:30 in the morning because his schedule is so crazy. So it's really about squeezing it in. He doesn't even have gym every day, which is real. The obesity rates in this country are crazy. They should be having these kids taking phys ed every day. They can't even put that in the schedule. So you actually are talking about squeezing in. You're talking about redoing the schedule, the curriculum, to find room for this, which I just don't see it as a necessity at the lower school level.
I couldn't disagree more. Again, whether you squeeze it in or whether you integrate it into other subjects, I mean, again, we're talking about literacy. Students take literacy. They take some form of English language arts every single day. If you even just start it at the elementary school level, introducing them to this vocabulary, okay, what is income? What is tax? What is inflation? And incorporate these terms into their vocabulary, gradually it becomes part of their understanding as they grow older. And this would be a perfect way to introduce this to elementary school children, so that by the time they get to middle school, they are developing their understanding. And by the time they get to high school, they can now be introduced to more corporate concepts of what is a stock, what is a bond, what are corporations? How do you invest in these? How do you get involved in that game, in that sort of, high stakes investment world? And where can you start at the most basic level with lower levels of income when you're starting out after college?
Now, how would you get the parents behind this? Because, again, my fight is not really with Marco, because he's in high school, and I remember in high school taking stuff like typing and accounting and stuff like that. So that was more of an elective. But when you're talking about elementary school, people lost their minds the past couple of years when Common Core was introduced. And this was English language, this was math, this was social studies. This is stuff that it's been there since the beginning of time, since the beginning when public schools were founded. And people lost their minds about Common Core. So how are you now going to go to these parents who 75%, I think the numbers are coming in, of public school parents opted their kids out of the Common Core testing last week and this week? How are you going to tell them now, you know what, we understand you don't want your little puddings to be tested for proficiency in English and math, but we're also going to now throw in economics?
Very simple. Give them a financial literacy test.
They don't care.
Give them a financial literacy test, okay? Because studies show that since 2008, since the global economic crisis, there have been countless financial literacy tests on a variety of levels, and from high school through adults, for just on things like managing debt, managing risk, understanding debt and risk and inflation and things like that. And what these studies are consistently showing is that we are failing. We are absolutely failing, that adults today have absolutely no clue about these things. They're not taking the time to get educated. I mean, think about it. In our parents' generation, they had the security of Social Security to look forward to. They had company contribution or company defined benefit plans. They had a safety net for when they retired. They really didn't have to understand these things. But in our generation, we do. We already have to understand these. And certainly at the millennial generation, which basically is kids born between 1980 and 2000, they absolutely have to understand financial literacy, financial planning, financial management, wealth management, and growing money. They need to understand that now, because by the time they're ready to retire, they have no safety net whatsoever. And if they haven't planned well in their lifetime, they're looking at working until they die.
Yeah, I'm looking at working until I die.
Today.
Well, you happen to throw Common Core in there, and I think Common Core is really just an attempt to try to get the math and English levels up to an expected degree for any given age group. I think the problem is that it's seen as a threat by several groups. Mothers who will find out that children aren't necessarily geniuses, teachers that feel that they're being threatened because there's a different or new standard to be rated by, and also politicians who figured out a way to politicize it, and they even formed their own party, Stop Common Core, which backed all conservative candidates and has now definitely changed its name to the Reform Party. So I think that the Common Core issue, it clouds anything dealing with change. If you went right now to moms and dads and say, hey, we want to introduce some new courses and so forth, they'd flip out. And the reason is because there's this focal point, all politicized now, about grade school education, if not high school education. So I think there's a real problem that trying to effectuate changes now are good in theory, but probably it's not politically feasible.
Exactly. I think that's going to be a fight that you're going to have if you want to change the curriculum in any way, especially to include a course that, you know, I think I mentioned to you, I considered it a foofy sort of course. I'm like, I don't want my son taking this sort of fluffy, foofy course when he can be studying math and science and that sort of thing. So.
Well, it's not a fluffy, foofy course.
Yeah, no,
okay, and you have to study science and math.
Again, I think that it can be integrated into other subject areas. I think that, again, the studies show that less than 30% of Americans really understand anything about financial planning, financial management. And that's kind of scary because if you don't understand it, then you're going to go through life afraid of it, and so you'll never enter it, okay, because you don't know where to begin, how to start, who to trust. And again, after the global economic crisis, people are really afraid of financial advisors and financial planners. What are their motives, and where are they going to take me and my money? Am I going to lose all of my money? And I think the fear of losing their hard-earned money keeps a lot of people out of the whole mix of financial planning and not even looking at it altogether.
That these kids have more than enough time to develop, which is one of the arguments that are made by the Common Core opponents, is they say our kids have all the time in the world for tests and these hard stressors and everything else. I would say the same thing about the financial courses. These kids have plenty of time in high school and college afterwards to learn about the stock market and investing in mergers and acquisitions and the Uniform Commercial Code, and they have plenty of time. I don't know if my 10-year-old has the time when he can't even get gym every day.
They don't have time, Mirna. They don't have time. I've taught for the business departments now of a number of colleges, and I can tell you, colleges don't teach this stuff. So even the kids graduating from college, sure, they're learning their business law, they're learning management skills, and very generally what the business world is about, but they're not learning specifically what it means to manage your money, to plan for your future, to understand the importance, for example, of life insurance. I mean, do you know that today to bury someone is anywhere between $10,000 and $30,000? Who has $30,000, lying around to bury a loved one? God forbid somebody passes away unexpectedly. Who has that kind of money lying around? And what happens is that people have to go out to friends and family members to raise money all of a sudden because they can't even afford to bury their loved ones. And yet, if you had done something very simple like life insurance, okay, to cover these inevitable events in our life, something like that is a financial planning vehicle that people really do need to understand the importance of, and nobody really does.
Well, Marco.
Cremation. Actually, it is cheaper, but it's
Yes,
better
it
for
is.
a lot of different reasons. But all I can say is that thinking back when I graduated from high school, if I knew some basic investing, and with the energy and drive I had back then, I would have been able to retire 20 years ago.
Sure.
And I think everybody should have that opportunity instead of, as you said, waiting until, you're old and gray, wondering why you don't have a nest egg. And I think that learning these subjects while you're still in school makes everything relevant. I mean, one of the problems in school, it's all theoretical. I talk to a lot of young people. They want to drop out of school. They're not stupid. They're bored. They go to class, they learn abstract theory. They don't relate it. Even in law school, they would always be relating the law to practical situations because you need to make that immediate connection. So I think there's no reason why people in high school don't have the capacity and the interest to learn that, especially when young people like money, things that money buys and so forth. If they see a connection between if I learn this, if I'm good at math, and if I can figure these things out, I will make money. And
Yes, absolutely.
wearing bling's a big thing.
Yes, wearing bling is a big thing.
So how do you now, how would you incorporate it? How would you jump the hurdle of trying to tell people, I know you've said for you, at least in your mind, telling people if you start off early enough learning about these financial vehicles, about the stocks and about savings and about putting aside money for your eventual death, that if you start early enough, you'll get to the point in your life where it becomes almost intuitive, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm assuming that's what you're saying. So how do you jump that hurdle, though, when you get to these parents who really don't want their kids learning anything new, is what it sounds like to me. Because, when I heard about Common Core a couple of years ago, I was like, oh, this is great, because now we can get rid of this separate and unequal system of education that we have in the United States. Because let's be honest, I grew up in the inner cities of New York, in the Bronx, and the education there is definitely not the same as the education in the suburbs. The curriculum was set by the administrators of the school, the teachers, and so forth and so on. So for me, getting a uniform sort of curriculum like the Common Core was a good thing. I didn't see it as a bad thing. And then I started hearing all these people protesting and signing petitions and what have you. So now, how do you jump the hurdle of telling someone, okay, we want to incorporate something new into your curriculum? How do you get the parents to come on board with something like this, which would be unprecedented?
Well, you're going to need a slow sell, because the bigger the iceberg you have to turn around, the longer it takes. So you'd have to start around the edges, showing them the benefits,
Yes.
showing them how their kids can relate to real life subjects. They can understand finances at home. If you're in high school, you're saying, Dad, give me $400 for the latest cell phone. He says that $400 is a lot. They'll understand that they can't get the 400, but they don't understand what it takes to make 400
Exactly.
other than a minimum wage job. They don't understand about passive income. They don't understand how the whole idea about capitalism, having money and others make you rich, that you're not limited to a hourly rate. So those are the types of things that the parents know and realize intuitively, if not directly, and that's the kind of thing that the kids will get excited.
Well, one of the things that I do, being in the financial services industry, is go to schools and work with the parent teachers associations, and I do financial literacy workshops for parents. And I always start the workshop with the same question. Would you have made different decisions if you learned financial literacy back in middle school, in high school, if you had learned these principles earlier in life and really just gotten sort of the basics, the foundation of managing money, planning ahead, planning for your future? Would you have made different decisions in your life? Would your life look different today if you understood these principles 20 years ago? And I always get a resounding absolutely yes. My life would be different today. I would have made different decisions. Now, I grew up in a household where parents, again, they worked for the government. My parents were in law enforcement. They had great pension plans. They had great, government defined plans, and they had Social Security. They had a lot of different things to look forward to in retirement, to provide for their retirement, that they didn't have to think about. They didn't have to get educated about. They just knew that it was there and that it was going to be there. And it is. It is there for them now. I mean, my father's been retired from the NYPD for 20 years, and he still receives his pension, and he lives just fine from it. So he never had to think about it. As a result, they never taught us anything about it. So I sort of had to learn, in bits and pieces as I entered the workforce, what is the best thing for me? When you learn simple things like taxation or putting money into pre-tax accounts, and the difference between what is actually being removed from your weekly paycheck versus if you had allowed it to just be taxed right now. So something just understanding the tax advantages or benefits of long-term planning are critically important to how much money you get to keep now, how much more you get to keep later, and how much it'll grow over the years if you understand interest rates, again, and compound interest. Let me put it to you this way. If you put your money into a savings account today, at just about any bank, you're looking at getting less than 1% interest rate, right? But if you go charge a few items on your credit card, you're going to get charged 24% interest rate. Okay? The banks certainly understand interest rates and compound interest. They understand it. We need to understand it.
Absolutely. Well, it looks like we're out of time for our main discussion, so let's move on into our lightning round, which today is, did the United States stick its political foot in its mouth by opening up diplomatic relations with Cuba? So I'm going to start with you, Marco.
Well, this might be the opportunity to have the Mario Bo people sent back and to get even with Castro when Jimmy Carter put his foot in his mouth. It may also be time to forget the conspiracy theories about Castro assassinating or having John F. Kennedy assassinated, and therefore all of that stuff going back and forth as retribution for the Bay of Pigs and the several attempts that the CIA made to assassinate Castro. So Americans have the penchant for forgetting things. They like to forget things, and there's not that many people old enough to really remember John F. Kennedy or what he was all about. So I say, sure, why not?
God, you're old.
Did you call him old? You're terrible.
39.
39.
Adeline.
Well, no, the short answer, okay? Certainly there is an ugly history there. There's no question about it. But having the embargoes in place really haven't done anything to improve that relationship one way or the other, and it's been over 50 years. I think that it was certainly time to start to try something new, and that we could benefit from being in a more friendly relationship with Cuba. So I think that we did not stick our political foot in our mouth, so to speak, by opening the door to that relationship. I think that it was a positive step in a positive direction. And actually, I am a faculty member that's recently been selected to go to attend a 2-week faculty development seminar in Cuba this June. So I'm super excited about the possibilities of developing this relationship and sort of seeing, as a business professor, the trade opportunities that will open up. And the business opportunities that will open up, and academic opportunities, I mean, just all the way around. I think that we're going to see explosive change with Cuba within the next decade, and that they're all going to be great things. So, no, I don't think that America sort of screwed up with that one.
Yeah, I don't think we screwed up either. Cuba hasn't been a real threat to the United States in decades, if it ever was a threat. I know a lot of the propaganda that came out about how horrible Cuba was and the Castros were had to do a lot with the Cold War with Russia because of their relationship with Cuba. A lot of people have this lingering bad taste about Cuba in their mouth because the country is communist, as if communism is contagious, which it's not. You also have, the issue that people talk about the human rights violations and how the Castros have people killed, but then we pick and choose who we condemn for human rights violations, because if that was the case, we wouldn't be friends with China. Well, we wouldn't have anything. We wouldn't have clothes. We wouldn't have, furniture. We wouldn't have cars if we broke our relationships with China. So the United States kind of poo-poos, oh, yeah, we understand that China has human rights violations, but they're not bad. Meanwhile, people are dying every day and executed if they look at someone the wrong way. So
sure.
I think it's just, we pick and choose who we're going to have our diplomatic relationships with, who we're going to have these embargoes against. So absolutely, I think it's a win-win situation for the United States to enter into diplomatic relations again with Cuba. I think it's right for tourism, it's right for investment, and I think it's time. It's just time.
It really is. I mean, and if you think about it, this whole sort of fallout came as a result of Cuba's relationship with Russia, and yet we still try to have a relationship with Russia. We still try to have a relationship with other countries that it's been very difficult to have a relationship with, and we're working on that. So why not Cuba too? Doesn't make any sense. Absolutely, it's time to take a step in a new direction.
Absolutely. Well, that does it for us for this episode of the Opinion Talk Show. Please keep sending us your comments. We love reading them on YouTube, and sometimes we actually get on there and fight back with you guys on those. So we love getting your emails.
Yeah, the hate mail.
So keep writing us, keep leaving your comments, and after all, it is your opinions that count and matter. So thank you for watching the Opinion Talk Show.
Bye.